In this video, I'm going to talk about the execution and cycles. So these are two important things you need to know when we continue our journey to be professionals in main. So for this, I have this scenario with this funny arrow, which also shows you how you can do whatever shape of your scenario to make it just useful or just funny, just up to you. And we move to the the board, we may say, like the dashboard of scenario, of the view of your scenario and how it executes. So what we mean by execution, it's literally a one run of your scenario, right? So it's either when you run it like this with this button, right? Or when you run it with a schedule that you can set in here, right? So we already spoken a bit about this. So again, if it's a not webhook, if it's a not a web instant trigger, all the rest will be triggered accordingly to this settings, the settings of this trigger, which can be the only one currently in scenario, and it's literally a place where you start your flow. And as you may know or may not know yet, there are some settings that you can select, right? So it can be run once. Usually it uses at regular intervals. The minimum of them is 1 minute. It's actually not on all plans. You can find this in a pricing page, just make and pricing. So you can, so make.com, and here you can find the pricing and the intervals. So previously that was a little bit differently. So right now Make has, as you see on a free plan, the minimum interval will be 15 minutes. The rest have minimum interval of 1 minute. So just you to remember, right? So this is about the minimum interval, and the rest is pretty self-explanatory. So it's either every day and or days and months, and so here you have advanced setting, which says start and end, and as you may understand, that literally explains system a little bit more where that thing will happen, right? So if it's every day, let's say, right, so it's not can be set like from now on endless, but you can start it, let's say, after, I don't know, in next month, for example, so starting from next month or so, and so on and so forth. Same for the days a week, and so, right? So you can determine the start and ending day of when your scenario will be started. So the rest is relatively simple, right? So you just set that's either using the picker for the time, as in here, right? Or day of a month, or just a month. Once will give you the date picker for the whole month with the time and date in here. So as we've spoken, that will be the execution, right? So when it runs either using this schedule in a trigger that calls actually automatic execution, right? Or manually when you run this magic button that calls run once, that will be the execution. Also the trigger you may find here, by the way. So previously it was only here, right now you can find it, click on this button. So that is execution when your whole scenario, or as we call it, like the parts that connect it to the main thing, right, executed. Because if you will just unlink the module here, it won't be executed definitely, right? So it has to be linked to the main thing. And we are going to test a couple of things that will allow you to explain what is also execution and what is different between the executions and cycles, which are a little bit different thing. So if I open this, actually, right, it's a history of your executions. And as you see, we have either like a play sign here, right? So icon of play means that execution was executed manually. So super simple to compare this play, right, and this play here. And if we scroll a bit down, right, so you see this clock. This, again, as you understand, was executed with the clock means that was execution triggered by the trigger. So it was a scheduled execution, right? If you have a scenario with a webhook or instant trigger, that instant trigger will show you this. So this lighting sign means that was executed with the instant trigger, which, as you can see here, it's immediately, right? So just you to remember. So then each of these executions will be shown here, right? So, and I can just jump into it and see all details about the current execution. So you have here the cycles, and by default, right, when I run this with a manual, it will be always one cycle. But if you have several cycles just like this, right, so you will see the amount of them, and you will have an option to switch between of them. We will talk about the cycles in several minutes, so let's just finish with this one. Again, the URL of the execution will contain the ID of this particular execution. Actually speaking about the URL, as you may see here in make, right, we have that structure of URL. This will be your instance, right? So currently you can select either US1 or EU1, and make.com enterprise instances has another URL, OEM instances might have another URL. So this is your instance URL, so you just remember that it is. Then we have our organization, and if you switch on the org, again, it's self-explanatory, and it says organization and 58, that ID of the org, the ID of organization. When you switch to scenario, that 25 in my case, it's an ID of a team. We're going to talk about this, but just quick heads up so you remember it. And that's scenario and URL. This is ID of your scenario, then logs, right? And that ID will be ID of your execution. The current execution ID here matches to ID here. That's why, like how you actually can build this ID, right? The URL, and the whole thing called scenario URL, right? Either scenario log URL and so on. So that log that we opened allows us to jump into modules and see all data in here as we used them before. So inputs and outputs, everything, right? So, and that also allows you to see if you have some execution with an error, just like this, right? So that's literally was not started. And it's interesting also how you can see even super quick, right? And just the data that brings the execution, how you read the history log, right? So you see we have a filters here. So some people don't know, and you should know it, right? So how you can filter. So we have a filters here. If you click on the start, you can filter this execution's time and a status also. So you may just select errors, for example. I just want to see the errors. And you have duration. It doesn't show if it's like super fast. It says like less than a second. And number of operation you spent. And also data transfer. So as you see here, 0 means we literally didn't transfer any data, which is logical, right? Because that was faulty JSON that was never started to run. And system says you that it's a 0-byte transfer, right? But if I will have some more things in here, so we have transfer of data between the modules, right? And we have these numbers in here. It's super small because I run just a set variables module to show you some things in it. Also, you have some information about the like a total duration of scenario here in the data, as you can see, the operations and data size, everything, and you have a log. So in this log allow you to show, when we will talk about this a little bit later, or we go deeper in error handling, right? But for now, what you need to understand that this shows you like a particular operation information. You may switch to more advanced. That will give you like a little like more details. That's exactly how scenario works. Like cycle started, it was initiation of each module and each connection. Then we go to you see we have execution of the cycle, then we have commitment, and so on. So we have some phases. So there's some like more advanced information, and then we have finalization. But that sometimes allow you to, go a little bit deeper and understand it. So let's jump to cycles, and you will be able, hopefully, to understand how that works and how that compared to the execution, right? Also, I want to mention here, while we just exploring this stuff without error handling, that we have the incomplete execution. This is option to kind of save the data if the execution failed. So then we'll be saved in incomplete executions. So cycles, as you may see here, right? So when you like logically run this scenario, right? This module will be run at once, and that module, like a second one, will be executed as much as bundles we have on output of this module. In this case, I use set multiple variables module, which just returns us one bundle of data. As you see here, it has one output and one bundle. So that bundle contains this is just the one bundle. If I would have, for example, some array, I will just create a super simple array. Just like this. So that will have several bundles in here, right? So then corresponding modules will be triggered several times after it. So as you see, each of them was triggered 4 times. So with this one, you should understand that the number of executions of module will be equal to previous module bundle number output. So if as much as we have bundles on output of this module, that much time we will execute that module. So again, I can jump in here in the previous one with a ton of operations. So 35, that's actually how you see the number of operations that we spent, right? And it's also shown here. So that one, again, I ran this one. We got 4 bundles on output. That was executed 4 times, but each of them had 1 bundle on output. So correspondingly, rest of them also have 1 bundle on output for each operation. So you see here, so 1 operation for each module execution or each module run. Okay. And now we go a little bit deeper in a cycle. So cycle. It's an option to run the module several times during one execution. So again, one execution, it's when your scenario will be triggered by automatic. It's actually interesting note. Also remember, the cycles won't work when you run the scenario manually, only with a trigger. So it means in automatic mode. And that allow us to execute scenario several times. This is useful for several cases. So for example, you may do the processing of a data and repeat that several times to get more and more data to change something and play with the filters. We will have this later, where we will play with a more advanced scenario. So for now, I just want to show you a couple of additional modules that they call them tools we have here, plus explain you what exactly is cycle and how this works, how leaves and scopes of variables of this cycle that Make has. So let's go to our super common module that calls set multiple variables. Okay, or set variable. Super easy to understand, right? So set variable has just one variable to set multiple, returns you several. So in that set multiple module, I set several expressions, as you can see here. So 1, 2, 3, 5, 7. 7 variables lives in this module and returns us 7 variables here. So my goal here is to run this whole thing and compare several parameters that we will set in our modules and in scenario settings for a cycle. So as you see, each set variable or set multiple variable has this setting that calls variable lifetime. So that means that this variable will live one cycle only, and by default it's actually one cycle, right? So if I select set variable module here, so that will be set to one cycle all the time. Another option is to set to the execution. So to understand the difference of this, we need to basically run it and see how work our execution and cycle. So once again, the cycle, it's like cycles live within the execution. So it might be several cycles within the one same execution, but not opposite. You may not have like several executions within one cycle. The settings for cycles you have here. So I said that my scenario may have 3 cycles within one execution. Okay, so max number of cycles 3. So if I will just my trigger set to each minute, no limitation, so I will activate my scenario right now and it will run once. So as you see here, if I run it manually, it will be executed 11 operations, right? So each of my modules run once, so I have 11 modules, 11 operations, super simple. But if I will activate it, and it's actually cool in Make that you can see the real execution in real time here in this tab, right? So as you see, we have 29 operation span. Why is that? That is because we have some filters in here, so not all modules were executed exactly the same number of times, and we had 3 cycles, and we can switch between them. So as you see, we have all of them executed, and then cycle 2 we have part of them executed, and cycle 3 we have another part of them executed. So let's go in settings and see a bit inside that module. And that and this, we have 3 of them. They set to show you again the values inside the cycle. So these guys calls increment or increment functions. So these are literally counters. Okay, so just assume that you need to count a number of operations, like as how much times whatever data passed through the thing. Literally it might be initial one, so how many times at all I ran the scenario, and based on it I want to do some filtering and so and so. So we need to calculate it, or just do odd even options, right? So for data distribution, I want to have my data split it on 2, so I just can say like, okay, if this odd or this even, then I will do something. So that is increment, and only one option of use them. There are a lot of use cases for it, but that is just the odd and even thing, just one of them. So it's literally counter. So if I go to my scenario here, right, and I just open this counter, it will show me something like 37. It means that module at all was executed 37 times since I added it to scenario. Why? It's just because of the fact that that counter set to reset never. Okay. Another counter I have set to reset after one scenario run. So means after one execution. And that one I set to reset after each scenario cycle. So as you understand, that counter will be resetted after each scenario run. So it starts with them with a 1, and whatever like runs whatever it runs, that value will be counted like each time when the scenario runs. Okay, that will leave and will be resetted after each cycle. So with this one, let's go to our history, and we had 3 cycles. So let's go and explore these counters. So my first counter, right, in first cycle, because we have 3 cycles here, means each of these modules was executed 3 times. So we literally started kind of scenarios 3 times within the one execution. And if I switch to first cycle, definitely that will show me 37, like more. It's a 43 already, because in total that was executed 43 times. It's never resets, because it says never. That was executed like 3 times in the same scenario, but that was a first cycle, and that guy is never reset, like it resets only when the complete scenario runs. So then we have another cycle, right? So it was executed twice, so it has a value of 2, and a cycle 3 will give them a value of 3, right? While this one, even though in a cycle number 3, because it leaves only 1 cycle, right, and will be reset after each cycle, so it has 1. If we would have some whatever array, or I don't know, you would need to calculate something, right? So it might definitely have more, like 10 or something, but it would be resetted during each cycle you have. So that's about the time how leaves the counters or increments, and same applicable for my variables, like set variables. Let's jump in here and see what we have. So these are just if empty, these are functions, and these are our guys for execution. So my execution module in here calls execution because, as you may see, it leaves only 1 execution, right? So means each execution, not each cycle, like execution, it's more. The value of these variables will be reset, not each cycle. That one calls a cycle just because the variable lifetime, it's a 1 cycle only. So means the variable can be overridden kind of several times during even 1 run. That guy is a get, and these guy cycle values. So I use these filters just because I'll show you what happened exactly. So even though we have this variable set as an execution, this is just important to remember. So let's explore it. We have values that we set for it. So I use counters from correspondent counters here. Okay, so let's see. So my execution counter shows me 1, and it's correct because it's just start of execution. It will be 1 cycle. Also, it's start of the cycle. It will show me the 1. Okay, and total counter will be 52. So it's good. We switch to cycle 3 at once to see the difference, right? So my execution won't expire, right? And it will count, it won't be resetted during each cycle, will be count 3, which is logical. The cycle will be resetted, each cycle will have 1. So my values, counters here will definitely show the same. And the cycle one will also show the same. So the idea is, even if I want to, if I need to have my value that would leave the whole execution with the same value, I should not run this module once again, because it will literally will override the existing value. So if I would set something to leave this variable during the whole execution, right, that variable will override the value. So you see here, I have my cycle check variable set to, and here I use my 14, which is the execution, right? So that changes, and potentially it should have value 1, value 2, value 3. So I set to give the value first, right? So value first only if that will be the first cycle in this case, or like a value of 1. But if we will check it more precisely, so during the, so that is understandable. So this will reset each cycle. This is okay, this is fine. But that should leave during the whole execution. And during the first cycle, it shows me first, which is good. But on a 2, it simply has empty because it literally was overridden by the variable itself, the expression set to have this one. In case of opposite, it just override this value with a nothing. That's why I have empty here for my cycle check. Okay, and for this I use these 3 modules to illustrate you the life cycle for the set variable, which is set to be resetted only after the execution, means which is life cycle is execution, not the cycle. I have these modules, again, they are set variable, super simple, that value first, that is set to reset, lifetime set to execution, means it will literally leave the whole execution. That's set for cycle only. But here I have a filter, so, and that filter will filter us the same, so it will pass my execution counter equal to only 1, means that will be both of them will execute only during the first cycle, then we won't touch them. But how we potentially can get these values from them if we won't touch them, if we won't run, we won't have outputs, right, for these modules. So I use get variable, and that is also important module, just because you use get variable to get values from different modules from different branches. And this is good example on how to use it. So each time I use, that's how it works. So you just simply have name of your variable, right? Setting here calls execution value, and that calls cycle value. 2 simple values. My get test values will get both of them. So that's get multiple variables. It will just collect values from different variables from my scenario, right? So it calls cycle value and execution. So it will call both of these guys all the time, even though they won't be executed, it will call it, just to illustrate you how our variables will leave. Okay, and this one I actually have my counter counting, right, because I haven't stopped it, and it runs like each minute. So I just stop my scenario. We'll go to last one. It was weird for me, like why my never increases again and again. So it's like 67 already. And this is cycle 1, so let's see our values. Our execution, the cycle 1, so it's just start counting. It was resetted definitely before, so we start scenario again, and it counts 1. So you see 1 here. Our filters correspondingly, because it takes its value, so you see it's popping up, so this is number 14. It takes 1 here, 1 here, filter pass it for both, and both will return us the values, just the text first, right? So first cycle, first module run, I'll get. The get definitely will get the values we set. Both of them are first, all good, all fine. Go to cycle 2, and here we will see the difference. So our counter that expires only the whole scenario run, set for execution, for whole execution, right? Set to 2. That means these both filter won't be passed, okay? And let's see, so how will work our time. So once again, to remember, to remind you, that variable lifetime execution value set to not reset during the whole execution, while that set by default for one cycle. So if I go and open this, you will see the difference already, right? So my execution value, which is this one, has first still, because even if it wasn't run, the variable lifetime set to execution, while cycle already was reset because it says round trip here, but it's a cycle. So if we go to settings, we may see that our variable lifetime here set to one cycle only. So it leaves only one cycle, and that proves us the S concept. So it just was not even be returned because it's empty, right? So try to get it, but it's not exist even. It's not even empty. It just does not even exist because it was not executed, right? So we have nothing here. And that's how works this lifetime, why it's important, and like shows you the options. We don't speak about the use cases right now a lot here. It just shows you options that you have in Make with these executions. And also you now know and remember what is difference in cycles and executions and how to work with them. So see you soon next video.